Hey there, welcome back to the Lifestyle School Podcast. I am your host, Hope Black, and today I want to have a conversation about fasting, but probably not the way you're expecting. If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know I talk about fasting a lot, and we teach it inside of Lifestyle School. I use it personally. It has completely changed my relationship with food, with my blood sugar, my insulin resistance, and ultimately my ability to lose weight and keep it off. The weight loss isn't actually the best part though. And this is what I've realized after practicing fasting for years and coaching many people through it. And now don't get me wrong, weight loss definitely matters if you're carrying an extra 50 pounds like I have been recently after having this fourth baby. If you're carrying 80 or even 100 pounds, losing weight can dramatically improve your health, your confidence, your ability to move around, do the things you love, your energy, your quality of life, seriously. And so I don't want to minimize that. But at the same time, if all fasting did was help us lose weight, I honestly don't think I would still be talking about it as much as I do week after week after week. So the reason I continue to teach fasting is because of what it changes inside of you. It changes your relationship with discomfort, with food. It changes the way you respond to stress, and I think it changes the way you think. And it teaches us discipline, patience, and it builds confidence because you begin keeping promises to yourself, which is huge. And these things spill over into every area of your life. And recently, an old client of mine came across a reel on Facebook, and she sent it to me. It's by a creator named Devin Linder. I have no idea who this person is, but I did want to give him credit because in this video, he listed 9 lessons about fasting, and I was like, wow, this resonates. He articulated this in such a way that I felt like made a lot of sense for me on my own journey, but I think it also really reflected a lot of things that I hear my clients say over and over and over again. And so while I don't agree with every single phrase exactly as written, the overall message I thought was incredibly powerful. And as I read it, I found myself thinking, yes, this is why fasting has been so transformative for me and for the people I work with. So today we're going to do something a little bit different, but I want to take you through those ideas and expand on them through the lens of metabolic health, mindset, and everything we've been talking about here at the Lifestyle School Podcast for the last, year and a half. Because I want you to stop seeing fasting as simply a way to eat less or even improve your metabolic health. And I want you to start seeing it as a practice that shapes the kind of person you're becoming. So before we get into the 9 lessons, though, I want to give you guys a quick little personal update because that's what we've been doing these days as I'm postpartum with baby number 4. I've got 50 pounds to lose. I'm still just over 20 pounds down. I am recording this a little bit earlier in the week than I have been previously. So this isn't like lining up with my weekly weigh-in to see, how I'm doing. But I will say that I have felt really excited. I feel like I'm in this season where like the weight loss is becoming automatic. It's becoming easy. And that is a rare thing. And it took, I would say, at least like 7 weeks to get here. This is going to be week 12 as of Wednesday. And so that is really exciting because I feel like there's just like the snowball effect that happens. And I haven't counted 1 calorie, guys. I haven't restricted any specific food other than gluten because it does not agree with me. And I've tried not to eat it since like 2008. That's a long time. But I feel like I'm having this compounding effect. I went on a date with my husband this weekend. I put on my fat pants. If you've not heard that story, you can look back at past episodes, but I put on my fat pants, you guys, and they were feeling a little loose, which very exciting. Because that's been a long journey with, having pants that fit postpartum. Cliff Notes versions of that is, I bought these fat pants because my other postpartum pants that I've worn with my past 3 pregnancies after having a baby did not fit me, and I needed pants to wear. So I bought these pants like I was anywhere between 6 and 8 weeks postpartum. They were like just a tiny bit snug, but it was like, I just had a baby, they should fit. And then 2 weeks go by and they're just way too tight. I can't fit into them anymore. And then I had to buy some super fat pants. And so it's just been a fun graduation to celebrate, going from the really big pants to the medium big pants. But I think it's just funnier to call them my super fat pants versus my fat pants. Anyway, what other thing I wanted to share with you guys from just these last couple of weeks is, so my back at the end of June flared up really bad. I've had, chronic low back pain for about the last 5 years. And ever since I had my third baby, that has been a whole journey in and of itself. But I had a really bad back flare up as of the end of June. It's now, the end of July. It's still been something I'm dealing with. Unfortunately, I feel like we're making small improvements. It's getting a little bit better day by day. But I had this moment within the last week or so where I really needed to shave my legs. And I hadn't for a while because I literally couldn't bend over to shave them. And I don't think I told this story last week. If I did, I'm sorry, but that's just life. I had to get myself onto the floor of my shower to be able to shave my legs. And I had this flashback to 4 years ago when I had to do that. When I was in my first initial back flare up, not long after we moved to California. And I just was in a lot of pain, but simultaneously I just had this moment of gratitude of wow, I have struggled for the years that I've been dealing with this, with the pain and feeling really frustrated by the pain and how it's limited my life. But I think going through this back flare up has made me feel like, wow, it could have been so much worse. And so I just had gratitude for how much better it's been. Obviously, it's not great, it's not ideal, but having that moment of gratitude, I feel like just kind of changed my perspective. It reframed it in this beautiful way where versus being frustrated or angry, I was grateful for how far I had come prior to this back flare. So I wanted to share with you that story because I think this is really applicable. Life is hard, right? The older you get, the more you realize wow, life loves to throw obstacles at us. But thinking about how can I reframe this in the lens of gratitude, I think is really important. And I think it really changes things for us. And so I want to encourage you, if you find yourself in the midst of something hard, which most of you probably have something hard going on in your life, that's the sad reality of it. How can you reframe it and bring gratitude to the situation? Because it does change the way you think about it. One last thing I'll share from my personal update with you guys. This last weekend, my husband took our 2 older boys who are 9 and 7 camping for 2 nights. And so I was at home with our 5-year-old and our 6-month-old. And I was taken back 4 years into the past and was really reminded about how hard it is to have 2 small kids and no bigger kids. I 10 out of 10 think it's easier to have 4 kids, 9, 7, 5, and 6 months versus 5 and 6 months. Not that I try to parentify my children in any way, but they all play together so well. My 9-year-old specifically is just so naturally helpful with the baby. He loves his little brother and will play with him. They'll all play with him. They'll entertain him. They entertain each other. And driving in the car, I listened to so much crying in the car. You guys, over those 2 days, those 48 hours, I was like, wow, this is insane. But my 9-year-old sits next to the baby in the car. So he'll talk to him, he'll give him his pacifier, he'll feed him a bottle. And I just had this moment of I need to give a shout out to all the parents who are in the trenches with those little kids, because you guys are in the hardest phase, I feel every stage of parenting has its hard parts, but I feel that is a particularly hard phase. And so you're doing it. Keep going, one foot in front of the other, and it will get easier. Maybe more complicated once you have teenagers. But anyway, okay guys, with that, before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you, quick reminder that this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making major changes to your diet, your fasting routine, supplements, or exercise, especially if you have any chronic ailments that you're dealing with or acute. And if this episode is something that you enjoy, if you love listening to these weekly podcasts, if you would do me the biggest favor and share it with a friend, leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, follow me over on Instagram and or Facebook. The handle over there is @HopeLackCoaching. That would be such a blessing to me. It helps me get the word out and share what we're doing over here and what we're trying to spread, right? The beauty of health. And then if you guys want a easy, simple way to support the show, my ability to create this free content, a really easy way to do that is to go over to our supplement store on our website, www.hopelackcoaching.com. Top right corner, there's a button that says store that will bring you over to the supplement store. If you're buying supplements, buying from us, every product in my store is third-party tested for quality and purity, which is unfortunately something that you're not guaranteed when you're buying a supplement at the health food store, on Amazon, Costco, etc. And honestly, don't waste your money on supplements like that. I have a lot of really strong opinions about supplements, and you can hear them all on episode 43 of this podcast. Also, if you're like, I want to take supplements and I don't know what to take, that would also be a great episode for you to check out. I go over the core four supplements I recommend for metabolic health. All of the supplements over there, guys, are professional grade products. I use them myself. I give them to my kids, and I recommend them to my clients. And it's an easy way for you to support the show. So if you end up doing that, you will need a code to set up an account. That code is 104567. With that, guys, let's jump into the first of 9 lessons that this creator brought up on his reel. I feel kind of funny doing my podcast on this, but I think you'll enjoy it. And there's some really good points. So the first point said, I'm not trying to quote him verbatim, but something along the lines of, fasting isn't just skipping breakfast, it's skipping comfort. And, I thought this was such an interesting way to put it because, let's be honest, food is comforting. It's something we celebrate with, we grieve with it, we relax with it, we reward ourselves with food. We're stressed, we eat. If we're bored, we eat. If we're lonely, we eat. And food has become one of the primary ways that we regulate our emotions. And now there's nothing wrong with enjoying food. I am 100% on board with enjoying every meal that you eat. Food, I think, is one of God's good gifts, and it's meant to nourish us, and it's meant to be enjoyed. The problem is when food becomes a primary coping mechanism, and that's where fasting becomes so powerful. When you decide not to eat, not because you can't, but because you've chosen not to, you immediately come face to face with discomfort. And what most people discover is that they aren't uncomfortable because they're starving. They're uncomfortable because they've removed one of their favorite coping mechanisms. And that discomfort teaches you something. It exposes where you've been depending on food to solve problems that food was never meant to solve. And here's something I tell my clients all the time. Growth always begins where comfort ends. Think about every area of your life. You don't build muscle by staying comfortable on the couch. You don't build endurance by staying comfortable. Healthy relationships aren't built by avoiding uncomfortable conversations. Personal growth is not generally comfortable. Neither is learning a new skill. Discomfort isn't always a sign you're doing something wrong. Many times it's evidence that you're growing. And fasting gives you a regular opportunity to practice being uncomfortable without immediately running away from it. Every fast becomes a small reminder that I can do hard things. And every time you complete a fast, even if it's a short one, you build evidence that you're stronger than you thought that you were. And that confidence doesn't stay inside of your eating window. It starts to show up everywhere else in your life, and that is a really beautiful thing to witness. The second lesson said something that I think every person who has ever fasted eventually realizes. He said, hunger isn't the enemy, distraction is, or I would maybe even say hunger isn't usually the problem. The first few days someone begins fasting, or even weeks sometimes, they often tell me I was hungry all day. But after we dig into what happened, we realize something interesting. They weren't physically hungry all day. They simply thought about food all day. Think about that. They weren't physically hungry all day. They were just thinking about food all day. And those aren't the same thing. Real physiological hunger tends to come in waves. It rises, it peaks, and then it fades. And cravings, on the other hand, are usually attached to something else. Sometimes it's stress, maybe it's a habit, it could be boredom, loneliness, fatigue, or simply seeing food that looks tantalizing. How many times have you walked into the kitchen not because your stomach was growling, but because you were procrastinating something, or it was just a habit, or you opened the pantry door because work had become overwhelming, or maybe you grabbed a snack while you're scrolling on your phone because your brain wanted another hit of dopamine. That's not true hunger, and that's your brain asking for stimulation. Fasting shines a spotlight on those moments. Instead of automatically reaching for food, you begin asking better questions. Am I actually hungry, or am I anxious? Am I tired? Am I trying to avoid something? Is this stress, or am I just bored? And these questions are incredibly valuable because awareness always comes before change. You can't change a habit you don't notice. We talk about this all the time. And I think that one of the biggest gifts fasting gives us is it slows everything down just enough that we begin noticing our patterns. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. And the third point he takes us through is about energy and focus. Most people assume fasting makes you tired. In fact, I think this is one of the biggest objections I hear. Hope, how am I supposed to function if I don't eat? And it's a reasonable question because we've all been taught that if we don't constantly fuel ourselves, we're going to run out of energy. And I will even also put an asterisk in that if you have really high insulin and you haven't brought it down yet, you're going to fast, and you're going to feel that hunger for a while until your body's capable of accessing that stored fat. But here's what's fascinating. After your body becomes metabolically flexible, meaning it can efficiently burn both glucose and body fat, many people experience the exact opposite of fatigue. They feel sharper, more focused, productive, less distracted by food. That food noise is finally dialed down. It's no longer screaming in your ear. And there's physiology behind this. When insulin levels begin to fall, your body starts accessing stored fat for fuel. Your liver converts some of that fat into ketones, and ketones are incredibly efficient fuel source for the brain. And at the same time, your body increases hormones like adrenaline and norepinephrine. And now that might sound surprising because I think we associate adrenaline with stress. But from like an evolutionary standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Imagine our ancestors, if they hadn't eaten in a day or two, would it have been helpful for them to become sleepy, weak, and unable to think? Of course not. They needed to become more alert, more focused, and more motivated to go find food. And your body was created to help you survive periods without eating. Our body is remarkably intelligent. And this is one of the reasons I often schedule some of my most mentally demanding work while fasting, whether that's working on my podcast scripts, whether it's planning projects, recording episodes like this, because my mind feels clear and I'm not constantly thinking about my next snack. I'm not dealing with blood sugar highs and lows. My brain has steady fuel. And, that's another interesting thing I think fasting teaches you. When food isn't occupying your mind all day, you suddenly have mental space for other things. You start thinking about your goals, your relationships, your work, your faith, your purpose, instead of constantly asking, what am I eating next? Which, I lived in this spot for a really long time. I had insane food noise before I started fasting and fixed my insulin. You go from asking, what am I going to eat next, to asking something like, what kind of person am I becoming? And I think that's one of the most beautiful shifts that fasting creates. So, so far we've talked about fasting as choosing discomfort, learning to recognize true hunger, and discovering a level of clarity that many people have never experienced before. But now I want to kind of shift and move into what I believe is the heart of fasting, because ultimately fasting isn't really about food at all. It's about becoming someone who's capable of leading themselves well. And I want to talk about that next. So, number 4 is that he said is fasting isn't about food, it's about self-mastery. And I want to start this section with a question. What is one area of your life where you wish you had more self-control? I'm sure all of us, like, something comes to mind, right? When you ask yourself that question, where do you want to have more self-control? Maybe it's with food. Maybe it's with your spending habits and your budget. Maybe it's on your phone. I know for me, I need more self-control on my phone. Maybe it's with your temper or procrastination, with your consistency. Whatever came to mind, here's what I want you to think about. Self-control isn't built by talking about it. It's built by practicing it. And that's exactly what fasting is. I don't actually think fasting is a lesson about food. In many ways, I think food just happens to be the classroom. Every time you choose not to eat for a period of time, despite the fact that food is available, you're strengthening your ability to delay gratification. You're practicing saying, I don't have to act on every impulse I have. And that right there is a skill. In fact, I would argue that one of the most important skills that you can develop is that skill, not acting on every impulse. We live in a culture that tells us that every desire should be satisfied immediately. You're hungry, go on and eat. You're stressed, order that takeout. Are you tired? Drink some coffee. Feeling sad? Do some online retail therapy. Are you bored? Pick up your phone and start scrolling. Start the endless scroll. Every feeling has an immediate solution, but the problem is that constantly satisfying every impulse leaves very little room for growth. One of my favorite definitions of disciplines is this, of discipline, not disciplines. One of my favorite definitions of discipline is this. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. And I'm going to say that again. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. And I want you to think about that. Your body may want that cookie right now, but what you really want is better health. And your brain may want to skip your workout, but what you really want is strength and to be able to age healthy and not have a wheelchair or a walker as you age. You may want to hit the snooze button in the morning, but what you really want is the energy that comes from a consistent morning routine. Discipline isn't about punishment. I think they can be conflated. It's about choosing your future over your present comfort. Let's be people who choose our future over our present comfort. And that's what fasting teaches us. And here's something I've observed in my own life. The confidence I gained from fasting had very little to do with the weight loss, although that was great. It came from proving to myself that I could actually trust myself. Every completed fast became another promise kept. And when you repeatedly keep promises to yourself, we talk about this all the time here on this podcast, something really changes internally. You stop questioning whether you'll follow through, and you begin believing that you are the kind of person who does what they say they're going to do. And that brings it back to identity. And we talk a lot about identity here. And identity, like a changed, good, positive identity, changes everything about your life at the end of the day. And now to the fifth lesson. The fifth lesson said something along the lines, and it struck me. It said, your body whispers before it screams. And I think that's incredibly true. Our bodies are communicating with us all the time. And this is, again, another lesson we talk about at Lifestyle School a lot. And the problem is most of us don't listen until the symptoms become impossible to ignore. Think about something like insulin resistance. It doesn't usually happen overnight. If you listen to the last 2 weeks of the podcast, it was a 2-part series. We talked a lot about insulin. It doesn't usually happen overnight. For years, your body may be whispering. Maybe your energy is crashing after meals. Maybe you're hungry every 2 hours. Maybe you're gaining weight despite feeling like you're trying to do everything right. Maybe your waistline is just continuously growing. Maybe you're waking up in the middle of the night hungry, or craving sugar all afternoon. These are the whispers our body gives us. Eventually, those whispers become louder. Your fasting insulin rises. You see your triglycerides start to creep up. Your HDL begins to fall. Blood pressure starts to rise along with your blood sugar. And one day someone says, well, Hope, you're pre-diabetic. And your body has been trying to tell you that for years. And the same is true with stress, right? But we just weren't listening. Our body whispers, and maybe you don't know what these whispers mean. That could also be part of it. But your body whispers, things like, your body whispers, you're not sleeping well. You're more irritable. You're emotionally reactive. Or maybe it's like you find that you have to rely on caffeine to get through the day and you don't recover well from exercise. Those are whispers. And the problem is that our world is incredibly noisy. We're always distracted. We have our phones, we have the TV, you have podcasts, you have social media, emails, notifications, food. We rarely create enough quiet to actually notice what's happening inside of us. And one thing I've noticed about fasting is that it slows everything down. Without constantly preparing meals, eating meals, cleaning up after meals, or thinking about meals, you suddenly have a lot more space. And you start to notice your energy. You start to notice your thoughts, your emotions, your stress. And you begin asking, why do I feel this way? Instead of immediately distracting yourself from it. And that is incredibly valuable. And because awareness always comes before healing is even possible, whether we're talking about metabolic health, emotional health, or even spiritual health, you cannot address something you refuse to acknowledge. And fasting creates space for awareness. And awareness gives you the opportunity to respond differently. And I will say on this weight loss journey that I'm currently on, I'm doing a lot of fasting, and that is something that I was thinking about in kind of mental preparation is like, what is this fast going to, what is this new fasting schedule routine going to show me about myself? And a lot of times it shows us stuff about ourselves that we don't really want to see. And I will say that's been true about this, I need to have more patience about our character as well as just like our habits around food and whatnot. And so, it's a really big deal and it changes everything. And so moving on to the 6th lesson, it said something like this: I stopped bragging about it. Real discipline doesn't need applause. It shows up in your clarity, not in your captions. And now, that's a witty way of saying something. I smiled when I read that because I think there's a lot of wisdom there. We live in a world where almost everything gets documented. Every workout, meal, accomplishment, milestone. And, I want to be clear. There's absolutely nothing wrong with celebrating progress. There's nothing wrong with sharing your journey. In fact, I think sharing your story can encourage other people. I've definitely shared plenty of mine, but also I think there's something powerful about quietly becoming the kind of person you want to be, not because people are watching, but because it's who you've decided to become. You're doing it for yourself. And I often tell my clients that motivation is public, but discipline is private. Motivation loves excitement. Discipline loves consistency. Motivation says something like, I feel like doing it. But discipline says, on the other end, I'm doing it whether I feel like it or not. And that is a really big difference. And that's the kind of discipline that actually changes lives. And some of the healthiest people I know don't spend much time talking about how disciplined they are. They simply live differently. And, they plan their meals, they go to bed on time, they exercise, they say no when necessary. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because those habits have become part of who they are. And that's where I hope every one of my clients eventually arrive. That's the whole reason why I created Lifestyle School, and I called it Lifestyle School, not like the 30-day diet or, weight loss challenge or whatever. I want it to become a lifestyle. It needs to become a part of who you are, these changes that you're making. and hopefully get you to a spot where you're not constantly fighting yourself. You're not white knuckling every decision, but becoming someone whose lifestyle naturally reflects their values. And that's what identity work is all about. You don't become healthy because you occasionally make healthy choices. You become healthy because healthy choices become your default. And I think fasting accelerates that process, not because fasting is like some magic tool, but because every fast reinforces the identity of someone who is intentional, someone who doesn't have to react to every craving, someone who isn't driven by every emotion, and someone who can truly pause and think and choose, and then move forward with purpose. And so, as I'm going through these points, I feel like they kind of group themselves. So far, we've talked about choosing discomfort, recognizing true hunger, gaining some mental clarity, building self-mastery, and learning to listen to our body, and developing that quiet discipline. But I think the final 3 lessons that this guy shared are on the deepest level of all. And because they're no longer just about fasting, they're about freedom from impulse, freedom from distraction, and ultimately freedom to become, I believe, the person God created you to be. And so let's get into like the next 3 ideas before we wrap this up. So the 7th lesson said this: fasting makes you dangerous because a person who can starve their impulses can't be manipulated by the world. And so, I probably wouldn't use the word dangerous, but I absolutely understand what he was getting at. I would say instead, fasting makes you free. And I think about the world that we live in. Every single day, companies spend literally billions of dollars trying to capture our attention. Advertisements are designed to make you feel like you're missing something. I mean, that's what I feel like influencers do all the time on social media. Restaurants engineer and ultra processed food companies engineer food to be hyper palatable. You'll keep coming back for more. Social media platforms compete for every spare minute of your attention, and the message is always the same: you need this, you deserve this, treat yourself, just one more. And our culture constantly appeals to impulse, and the problem is if every impulse controls you, someone else controls your decisions at the end of the day. But fasting teaches us that something incredibly powerful. Just because you want something doesn't mean you have to act on it. And that's big. It's hard. That may sound simple, but it is actually life-changing. Every craving becomes an opportunity to pause. Every urge becomes an opportunity to truly choose. Instead of immediately reacting, begin asking yourself, what do I actually want? And is this moving me toward the life I'm trying to build? And one of my favorite habits to teach clients is just creating a pause. The pause might only last 30 seconds. It might last 5 minutes. Maybe it's, removing yourself from a situation and taking a walk, or just drinking water, calling a friend, praying, journaling, whatever. But the pause creates space between the feeling and the decision. And inside that space is freedom. And Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, famously wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom to choose our response. And I think fasting helps us practice living in that space, because every fast reminds us that we are not slaves to our appetite. We're capable of choosing something different. And I believe it truly goes far beyond food. When you're no longer driven by every craving, every emotion or impulse, you become much harder for the world to influence. Not because you're stubborn, maybe you are, I know I'm very stubborn, but because you're anchored and you know who you are, you know what you value, and you make decisions from conviction instead of emotion. And that is truly life-changing. And so the 8th lesson, he said something like this: fasting isn't about deprivation, it's about aligning yourself. And I absolutely love that, because one of the biggest misconceptions about fasting is that it's about restriction. People picture fasting as a punishment or as deprivation or suffering, but that's never how I've experienced. Granted, I've had some pretty hard fasts, and maybe in the moment they felt like that, especially when I was trying to lower my insulin and become more metabolically flexible. But to me, fasting is truly about alignment. And here's what I mean by that. Every one of us has goals. Maybe your goal is to lose 50 pounds like me, or maybe you want to reverse your insulin resistance like me, or maybe you want to have more energy for your kids, lower your inflammation, or just simply age well. Those are wonderful goals, but goals alone don't change lives, as we all know, probably at this point. Your daily actions have to align with them. If I say I value my health, every decision I make needs to move me towards health, not away from it. If it's moving me away from health, my life isn't aligned. If I say my family is my priority, but I'm constantly exhausted because I neglect my sleep, my life is not aligned. And if I say I want freedom from food, but food controls every decision I make, I'm out of alignment. And fasting becomes one way of bringing your actions back into agreement with your values. It's like a way of saying my long-term vision matters more than this temporary craving. And here's something I've learned over the years. Weight loss is rarely the biggest victory for people. The biggest victory is becoming someone whose life matches what they say they believe. Because that's integrity, that is true alignment, and there's so much peace there. Because there's something exhausting about living in conflict with yourself. Saying one thing, doing another, wanting one future, while repeatedly choosing behaviors that move you in the opposite direction. Fasting helps close that gap little by little, one decision at a time. And so our final lesson, guys, lesson number 9 from this social media post reel that I'm doing this whole episode on, he said this: when you control the flesh, you unlock the spirit, because true hunger isn't in your stomach, it's in your purpose. And I think that is a beautiful thought. And again, I don't know anything about this guy who posted this, but I'm going to give you my hot take. I know regardless of where you're at in your faith journey, I think there's something universally true here. Many of us spend our lives trying to fill internal emptiness with external things. While that might be food, it might be entertainment, shopping, achievement, busyness, success. Even those things that aren't necessarily bad can become distractions if we're using them to avoid what's really going on inside of us. One of the things I appreciate most about fasting is that it removes one of these distractions and it creates quiet. And sometimes quiet can be very uncomfortable. This is something I wrestle with myself a lot, because when the noise goes away, you finally hear your thoughts. You notice what you've been avoiding. You recognize what actually needs your attention. And sometimes that means you need to process grief. Sometimes it means you have to recognize burnout. Or it might be admitting that you're lonely, or it's realizing you've been chasing weight loss while neglecting your relationships. Sometimes it's recognizing that you've built your identity around your body instead of who you actually are. And for me personally, fasting has also deepened my relationship with God. Through scripture, fasting wasn't primarily about food. It's about dependence. People fasted during seasons of prayer, seasons of repentance, seeking wisdom, preparing for what God had called them to do. The absence of food created more room to focus on the one who truly satisfies. And I think that is still true today. Food can satisfy physical hunger, but it can't satisfy that deeper longing that we have in our hearts. Only purpose can do that. Only meaningful relationships can do that. Only a life lived in alignment with your true values can do that. And for me, only a relationship with Jesus Christ can truly do that. And that's why I think fasting becomes about so much more than changing our body. It creates space to examine your life, to ask better questions, and to slow down enough to remember what actually matters. So guys, as we wrap up today's episode, I hope you walk away seeing fasting a little bit differently. Yes, fasting can help you lose weight. It's an incredible tool. It's going to help you improve your insulin resistance. It's going to help you lower your blood sugar, reduce inflammation, improve metabolic flexibility, and make fat loss so much easier. Those are incredible benefits. But honestly, I believe those are just the beginning, just the tip of the iceberg. The greatest gift fasting has given me isn't necessarily a smaller, fitter, healthier body. It's a stronger mind. It's better self-control. It's confidence, resilience, clarity, a healthier relationship with food. It's the ability to pause before reacting. And it's learning that I don't have to obey every craving, every emotion, or every impulse. And most importantly, it's helped me become more intentional about the kind of person I want to be. I didn't put this in my notes here, but honestly, I don't know that I would have created Lifestyle School if I hadn't been fasting. I would definitely not have started this podcast. Truly, fasting has been a tool that has changed my life in ways that have nothing to do with my weight. And I often tell my clients that success in health isn't built by one grand gesture. It's built by thousands of small decisions that reinforce your identity. Every time you choose to keep a promise to yourself, every time you delay gratification, every time you choose long-term health over short-term comfort, you're becoming someone new. And you're building evidence that you're capable. And that evidence is what allowed me to do this podcast, to create Lifestyle School, to have the confidence to do that. And you're building evidence that you're capable, and you're building evidence that you're disciplined, that you're trustworthy, that you're resilient. And over time, that identity becomes far more valuable than any number you're ever going to see on the scale. So here's the question I want to leave you with today. The next time you fast, don't just ask yourself, how much weight did I lose? Instead, ask yourself something like this: what is this fast teaching me about myself? Or who am I becoming because I chose to do something differently today? Because if fasting changes your body but never changes your character, you have missed, I think, probably the greatest gift that fasting can give you. So with that, you guys, I know we left it kind of heavy, but it's the truth. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate every moment you spend with me here on this podcast. If this episode encouraged you, I would love for you to share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear that health is about so much more than just weight loss or even, fasting. And if you are ready to learn how to use fasting safely, strategically, to improve your metabolic health, reverse insulin resistance, and build a lifestyle that can sustain, that you can sustain for years to come, I would love for you to join me inside of the Lifestyle School for Weight Loss course. You can head over to my website, look into that, www.wholepotcoaching.com. If you have questions, always feel free to reach out to me. I love to hear from you guys. So with that, as always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Lifestyle School podcast.